Good morning. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to bring a little bit more of an administrative and hopefully not dry talk to you all. So my background started in healthcare in public global health, and so one of the things that I was really looking at as we started talking to Rich about the opportunities in the Maldives and Nepal was who's going to benefit from this? How do we think about this in a sustainable way? And I think we really have to acknowledge the history of colonialism in global health and how that's affected both how people want to engage with Western healthcare locally within these different countries and how we can really use that to our advantage and overcome it. So as we know, the global north and our developed areas have a lot of benefits, right? We have access to equipment, to staff, to basic social determinants that other places don't have. And as we're looking at doing this volunteer work, we really have to move from a gifting of services to developing high quality systems. So my role at Virginia Mason is very much focused on those frameworks and those systems and how we build reliability in every time. And it's what we know patients want from our systems and what we also hear from patients in other countries. So as we look at the urgency for engagement, while patients in other countries may be getting access to healthcare, 60% of those that die are not actually getting the appropriate care or the full level of care that they may need. So we need to continue to move that forward. You've already heard this morning about shortages of neurosurgeons worldwide and how that is increasing over the next few years. But there's also a huge need for healthcare workers, including nurses. And we need to think about that in conjunction with developing surgical systems, because without that, we won't be able to provide care reliably every time. And the post-op care, as you know, is critical for the outcomes. So as we look to address the worker shortages and build these systems, I think we can all play a part. And Dr. Park talked this morning, too, about the policy and the engagement of ministries of health, but we also can do that from the bottom up and do grassroots development. So this is from the advisory board looking at community health in the US, and I think it's also applicable to some of those global health pieces of what's our role and what's our timeline. So are we coming in as partners? Are we coming in as leaders and champions for surgery? Or are we coming in as donors? And any of these may be fine, but I think it's good to have the clarity in our own minds what our role is and what's our timeline for improvement. Is it a 1 week, 2 week stay, or is it longevity and sustainability and really building the system and training the next generation of surgeons, as well as developing a system that's going to underpin good outcomes? So these were three of the things that I was really looking for as I got back into global health, and was thrilled to hear Rich's responses to many of these in terms of the level of partnerships and engagement from the teams in both Nepal and the Maldives, the urgency and the engagement of administration as well as some of the nursing teams, and then the reliability was already starting to form. So the I'll get into more what the Maldives has done, but there were already hints of patient safety elements. So that path was already starting to be built. The three things that are really critical as we're looking at high reliability systems across different countries are building that floor, defining what our outcomes are, being transparent about where we are now, what is the baseline, and understanding our outcomes currently and being really clear with ourselves what those are, and then where do we want to go? What are the aims? And that scope can be small. It can be post-surgical outcomes. It can be infection reduction. But being clear with targets was going to move the metric more. The clinical education and training, I'll let Dr. Farrokhi and Dr. Chua talk to that more specifically, but we need to be developing those other generations, and then making sure that we're aligned with the local needs. there goes my picture again. Mr. Afal is essentially the COO for the ADK hospital in the Maldives, and his vision for patient safety has been tremendous. So in a few short years, I think it's about 3, they've started putting their staff through the IHA patient safety curriculum to really build both structure and culture at a different level. And talking about much of what, for better or for worse, healthcare reform has driven for us in terms of focusing us on quality outcomes and on how to build reliability in our systems. And then, of course, credits to Dr. Niaf, we have super wounds. So again, his vision for partnership is unique. So in the Maldives, we were lucky enough to be there when it was World Patient Safety Day, and the celebration and visibility of this was huge, which was actually quite surprising to me, seeing this so often in the US, but not as prominently abroad. Nurses were very much engaged in the process. They were encouraged to speak up, as were other staff. And then there was a big focus on patient education and really simple messages to patients about how they could engage in their care. And again, this seems like routine for us in the US, but it was phenomenal to see abroad as well. The nurses also were already looking at benchmarking. There's not a lot of benchmarks out there for quality in terms of how you measure or what you measure. And so the nurses each presented different topics on CLABSI, CAUTI, falls, pressure ulcers, readmissions, things that are common for us, but they really had to go the extra mile to be putting these programs into place and then to be measuring them against US metrics, which is a challenge in itself. It may be apples to oranges. They also shared on their transparency around medication errors and things that they had put into place to prevent these. We talked about new opportunities for sepsis management and rolling out bundles to help implement different types of interventions, such as fluids, on a very timely basis. And then we looked at the surgical pause. And they were just wonderful. They were so open to sharing, and it was a pleasure to work with them. There was also the clinical training that you just heard about in looking at resident training as well as sharing skills with the live surgeries. And then we were on the whirlwind tour to Kathmandu. So here, the environment was a little bit different.
We start each of our surgeries
I'll get there in just a second and see if I can pause it. So the environment was a little bit different. There was not as much discussion about teams. There wasn't as much discussion about safety yet. But the OR was a ripe opportunity to be able to start looking at that reliability and doing some small pieces of teaching. So this is Dr. Farrokhi instructing on surgical safety, and it's a great example of being able to take a small piece, a small scope, and start building that reliability in the system.
How we start each of our surgeries
Is it possible to make it louder at all?
Is that we do something called a pre-surgical pause or a timeout. The purpose is that the entire team knows each other and knows how each person is contributing to the procedure. How that works is we will ask each individual to introduce themselves and what they will be doing for the surgery. So you will tell your name, your position, and what you will be doing in the surgery. And I will start and we'll go around the room this way.
So what this did was really lowering the water level and encouraging anesthesia to talk with surgeons. The surgical team seemed very familiar together, but there seemed to be some different willingness to speak up. So it was a nice place to start. So again, there's some simple frameworks and building blocks that we can think about. Focusing on scale of impact and scope of influence is really important, and how we can start measuring these things. And focusing with the long-term goal of high-quality health systems, we can eventually get there together. And again, the grassroots up and the policy level down are key. So in closing, partnerships are essential. All of the people we met were just fantastic and so willing to learn, to share, and I think we may have walked away with more than we brought, which is always a pleasure. And then looking for opportunities for improvement as we move forward, and starting with a small scope will really help us get to the next level for global health. All right.
All right, thank you, everybody. And so I'm just going to basically share the impact of what you've heard all day on the local community neurosurgeon. There's thousands of us practicing in the U.S., and we all got into healthcare to help people. And as I was mentioning to Rich earlier today, we sometimes lose in the process of becoming who we are, the original purpose. And so the decades of work that you've heard about so far, all the work Richard has done, and the last 5 years of influence on a daily basis from Alison, sort of led me to this particular experience, and I'd like to sort of share the end point with you and what I saw as just one person coming in and experiencing global neurosurgery for the first time. This all started because I got lucky enough that Richard's wife was unable to make a trip, and next thing I know, I landed next to him on an airplane ride to JFK, and then the story continues. Let's see. So my initiation to global neurosurgery came a couple of months earlier, where this flyer landed on my desk, and you get lots of invitations to lots of things. But that particular day, I had heard a lot of grumbling from this brilliant, wonderful team of surgeons and PAs and nurses that I have about, we don't have this tool, or they won't let us hire this staff, or there was a lot of grumbling going on, and they were losing focus, and we were noticing, I think we're all noticing this in American healthcare more and more, we're losing focus that we do good stuff every day. And we help people every single day. But that's not what we think about at the end of the day. We drive home grumbly because the scissors weren't sharp or the tech didn't know what they were doing. And always wanting to get back into more global work, I thought this would be a great way to introduce my department to the root cause of why they went into healthcare. And so I said, okay, I'll go out and see what's going on in global neurosurgery. And then you can see this list of all these brilliant people that spoke that day, and many of them are in the room right now. And this story is how that one particular weekend led to me discovering the power of waterborne vehicles, and how Richard is connected to all of them. It really goes back to human-human interaction. As we started the last couple of nights here interacting and getting to know each other on a human level, we're all the same, all over the world, all specialties, all disciplines. We thrive on interacting with other people, having some sort of impact and meaning, to know that the hours and days we spend are relevant to our fellow humans. And from the moment I landed in the Maldives, I noticed that sort of humanity from the people that were on the boat to us, and I actually, it was interesting to see all the jet-lagged faces on the boat still smiling, as you can see Dr. Chua there smiling. That was the boat from the airport after many, many hours of travel. And literally 12 hours later, we are on the back of another boat with this wonderful group of people watching the sunset over the Indian Ocean, and had just spent an entire day getting to know the essence of what the people of that environment were about. And I don't know how to control this, but I will tell you about all these individuals here shortly. So vision and leadership came as sort of the forefront within the first 24 hours in the Maldives of how this was accomplished. Ali shared with you all the amazing things that they've pulled off in such a short period of time. And as we were traveling, and I had a lot of time on the plane to read, I was reading the history of the country, small country, hundreds of islands out in the middle of no real connection to a large landmass. And in sort of geographic isolation, religiously, purely Muslim, My heritage is the same. My people had geographic connections with the rest of the world, and we're in turmoil. How are they achieving such amazing gains in such a short period of time? And so it really set me up to start paying attention for how that happens. And in the upper left, you can see the picture of me and the chairman. And we got to know him from not only the beginnings of how he learned about finance by using his 50 cents that his father gave him for food money for school to buy a chicken. So then the $3 chicken would produce 25-cent eggs, and then he calculated as a 7-year-old that by having this chicken he could quickly learn to produce more than his allowance from his father. And then made the mistake of getting distracted by a game. His father cooked the chicken before he had paid it off, and he wound up learning that not only finance is important to learn, but honesty is important to learn. But from that lesson some 40, 50 years earlier, there's a little piece of land that you see above his head. So within 24 hours of traveling to the other side of the world, the next picture down, we're walking on an island that did not exist 2 years ago. He created this land, and that just kind of wrap your head around that. There's new land on this planet that didn't exist 2 years ago and now has vegetation, it has animals, it has a mayor who we met, and just the focus and the audacity and the vision and leadership to take on something like that speaks much to the leadership and vision of a human being. So next, when we saw the hospital that he had built and how he had advanced healthcare in his country and how he was singularly focused of bringing all the internationally available healthcare to this small island that's geographically isolated, it made me realize that leadership matters significantly in what we do in healthcare. And it translated into the conference that we attended last year, bringing all these wonderful minds together from all over the world. And the next day I learned that it was that vision that was translated by all the people he placed around him. And these were people who care about other people and were constantly thinking of how to elevate those around them. You walk into the hospital and you see pictures of your doctors, not dressed as high and mighty, superior beings, but just like normal human beings as part of the community, but lifted to know that you can trust them and work with them. The nursing efforts that Alison mentioned were amazing to see that they are bringing all individuals together and focusing on taking care of the community. And Rick and I really like the staff resuscitation lounge. That's the break room. But we like how hard you work your staff that they actually require resuscitation on a daily basis. The leadership, the vision, the emphasis on putting people there and empowering them to do what they do best really came together again in walking in and being able to broadcast to tens of thousands of people the surgeries that we were doing, which was, again, a small glimpse of the power of the last few steps that I had talked about. And seeing all that, seeing all those pieces come together, and seeing Ellie with his little baby and his wife, the future looks bright in the Maldives. And I think they will serve as an example to developing solutions to the world's problems that we've heard about all day today by simply having leadership, having vision, and bringing people together for the same cause. And I see no limits to what they can achieve, and I hope that I can contribute in some small part to all of that. Thank you all.